Modern society is seeking new ways to foster compassionate, caring community amid the brokenness of our world and relationships. Mark Zuckerberg, whose company produces virtual reality headsets, highlights VR's potential to foster empathy for others by transporting them into another person's world. VR artist Chris Milk argues that this technology can make us more compassionate, more connected, and more human, nurturing a deeper sense of moral responsibility and connectivity. Brothers and sisters, the world is searching for an environment filled with people who are more compassionate, more connected, more human. The world is searching for a caring community of people with a deep sense of connectivity and moral responsibility. The world is searching for God's church, living in the power of the Holy Spirit and expressing the compassionate care that is found only in and through Jesus. So the question for us today is, where are we? Where is the church as people all around us are suffering deeply in this fallen world? And where are we when people right within our Christian community are suffering deep traumas and are desperately in need of connection, compassion, and healing? Well, I'm so glad that you've joined us for today's show, because we're going to be speaking with a woman who God is using to help answer these questions so that Christians and the church can work to create a caring community for those who are suffering. You're watching One Day Closer, where we're learning together how to use our one day closer to eternity to bring hope and purpose to many. Let's go meet our guest for today. We're here today with Heather Evans of Evans Counseling Services. Heather, it's so great to have you on the show, and I'm so excited for us to be able to talk about such an important topic.
It's such an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just start, if you want to share with our guests a little about yourself and about Evans Counseling Services.
Sure, yes. I'm the director and founder of Evans Counseling Services. It's a group counseling practice located in Coopersburg, which is in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania region. And I started my own practice in 2005 when I moved back to the Lehigh Valley, and slowly it's grown. We now have 6 counselors and an intern, and in fact, within the next month, we're expanding our team even further, adding more counselors and a team of somatic practitioners, which really basically is going to be able to provide a lot more creative and holistic ways of reaching people. So yeah, I'm one of the counselors there, but I'm also really responsible for directing everyone else and really trying to influence the culture there. We are a Christian practice. All of us are Christians. We see people of all backgrounds, that some are not necessarily having the same background and come to us just because they've been referred by somebody from the community. But we seek to have an incarnational approach, which we seek to enter in and meet people where they're at and show them the love and the wisdom and the character of Jesus, and hopefully provide excellent care to the people that come to us.
Yes, I love that. I talk about that a lot in the men's ministry that I do, just that our incarnational component that we really need to, the first step is to meet people where they're at. I love that. Tell us a little bit how so God has kind of given you a specialization in the area of trauma and especially sexual abuse and exploitation. How did God bring that about?
Yeah, I would say it was really Him that brought it about. I really feel like this calling found me. As I said, I've been a counselor for over 20 years, and during that time I've had a variety of kinds of cases, but I was getting more and more cases of women who experienced childhood sexual abuse, women in situations of domestic abuse. So a lot of situations of abuse and trauma. And that kind of became the thing that I said, I need to become an ongoing student of this. Wow. I sought consultation from Dr. Diane Langberg, who is a well-known Christian psychologist, author, speaker, and really learned a lot from her. So on a personal level, it was really just the clients that God was bringing. But then on a local level, I started learning more about what human trafficking looked like. And I said, okay, we need something in this region. And so I also got involved locally by starting a nonprofit called VAST, Valley Against Sex Trafficking. So really, I think staying in the office was not possible, because not only do I want to impact the individuals, but I'm thinking about the systems and the community and how do we impact them as well. And so that happened on a local level. On a global level, I took courses through Global Trauma Recovery Institute, which trains and equips individuals to go to different places in the world and address global trauma by training and equipping trauma healing caregivers in their region. So I've been to East Africa several times over the last 10 years and seeking to take what I've learned here, being an ongoing student of trauma, and help equip people who've experienced systemic trauma, places like Rwanda, who've experienced the genocide.
Yeah.
And then finally, on a national level, I've been involved with a couple of denominations addressing abuse reform in those denominations where there sadly has been childhood sexual abuse or sometimes adult abuse by clergy, and seeking to make the church safer places. So if you can hear, the common thread of all of that is helping individuals who've experienced trauma, but also helping communities become safer places with trauma-informed care.
Wow, I love that. Obviously, we're helping individuals, but then also looking at the bigger picture to say, how do we create these communities and these places and spaces that are safe for others and providing the compassion of Christ. Yes. And so obviously I can tell that that God has directed you in this and you're passionate about it. Yeah. So why are you so passionate about what you get to do in this arena?
Well, I think it's first and foremost my identity as a Christian, and second, the career path I've chosen, which is social work, which really looks at an individual, but also looks at the system surrounding that individual. And I remember reading a quote by Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel, where he says that people who've experienced oppression, when you witness oppression, you must take sides. He says neutrality will always support the tormentor and silence the tormented. Wow. And that was so convicting for me as a Christian to say, how am I really, I see this as an expression in following Jesus and his heart and his mind. How do I represent Jesus to people who have experienced difficulty, but also how do I be a voice and amplify the voices of those who've been hurt? So, I mean, I think I've been really motivated by the stories I've heard in my office and in my community and around the world. I think survivors of various forms of trauma are the most courageous, creative, deep individuals that I've known, and I've learned so much from them. And it had to spur me into action as a Christian, as a social worker, and just as a fellow human being of what can I do to bring hope to them, but also to seek change in our society. Yeah,
I've heard it phrased, holy discontent, where God puts something within us, that we see that's broken in the world that needs Christ and needs his healing. And I see that in you. That's fantastic. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back and dive more into that.
Okay.
Stick with us. We'll be right back to discuss more of how we can create caring community for those who are suffering.
Watch Lighthouse TV wherever you go. Available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. Search Lighthouse TV online on your streaming device or go to our website, lighthousetv.org, for more information.
Welcome back to One Day Closer. We're here with Heather Evans talking about how to create caring community in our midst. So Heather, we just got to hear your heart and passion for especially bringing the love of Christ into those who've experienced trauma, not just to the individual, but also in shaping communities and systems that can help protect and care for people, which is fantastic. Let's start with a definition of trauma. So how would you define trauma?
So we can define trauma as an event that includes threat and results in the person feeling powerless, feeling helpless, feeling afraid or overwhelmed. That could be something like a natural disaster, a car accident, or it could be something more interpersonal in nature, such as abuse, various forms of abuse. Trauma by nature, it fragments, it overwhelms, and I like to say it rocks one's world. There's like a beginning and then there's an after. There's like a before and an after, and it takes away it takes away one's belief system. Diane Langberg talks about how we're made in the image of God to have voice and to have power, but trauma actually silences voice, and it makes one feel powerless. And we're created to be relational human beings, but trauma isolates, and it can damage trust in relationship.
Yeah, wow. And how, as we were talking, getting ready for the interview, you'd mentioned just different types of trauma, and you just did there as well, but talk a little bit to how relational trauma can have a deeper impact than some other kinds of trauma.
Yeah, there's actually a term called complex trauma, which is not an official diagnosis for those of us who are clinicians. That being said, trauma pioneers were the ones that created this term, and they said there's a difference between someone who has experienced trauma in combat or some type of a natural disaster, which in and of itself is significant.
Absolutely.
But there's a difference between that and someone who's experienced trauma that's interpersonal in nature, that is premeditated, that's repetitious. So we're talking about childhood sexual abuse or neglect. We're talking about domestic abuse, sex trafficking, things like that, where it was calculated. There's a different complexity to that in the way that it impacts one's body, belief system, and then ability to trust in relationship.
Yeah, and at the core of, God as a relational God, creating us to thrive in relationship with Him and with others.
Absolutely.
And then the depth of that, being betrayed by someone, being harmed by someone, abused by someone. How do you see God working in what you're doing and what you have the opportunity to do in His bigger story of redemption in people's lives?
Well, I think on an individual level, in the restoration of that image, that restoring a voice by bearing witness to someone and encouraging them to share their story, but the restoration of power by helping them to recognize their God-given power and how to use that influence in this world, and to do so in the context of a safe relationship. So to give them an opportunity to rebuild trust with someone who's an exception to what they've experienced, the betrayal and damage that they've experienced. So it restores hope. It buys back and returns to value. I think that's kind of on an individual level. And then on a church level, I just think of the story in Scripture, Matthew 21, where Jesus turns over the tables and He says, "You have made my house a den of robbers." And what He's doing is He's saying, I'm cleansing of any exploitation. I'm cleansing of this church no longer being a safe place. Yeah. So my thought is that us as believers have a responsibility to make churches safe places as well, to contribute to that restoration. And sadly, so often responses to abuse and trauma are often minimization or blame of the victim or dismissal or covering it up. And they're not responded to in a way that actually restores their value. It actually causes further damage. And we have an obligation and a warning and a calling from Scriptures again and again for us to actually be a place that contributes to restoration rather than further harm.
Yes, absolutely. At an individual level, how can one care for someone else who's experienced trauma and start to develop that culture just in their relationships?
One of the practical ways that I like to think about trauma healing is that trauma healing should be the reversal of the trauma experience. And so any relationship with someone who's experienced trauma, how do we keep in mind that loss of voice, that loss of power, that loss of trust in relationship, and seek to reverse that, provide the opposite of that by restoring voice, by giving them space to speak, and we listen, and we believe, and we are curious, we want to learn more. But how do we also give choice? We should never force someone to share with us anything that they don't want to share. So giving a lot of choice and finding ways to also build trust by, I like to say, just by being consistent in relationship, doing what you say you will do, even setting boundaries and letting people know what your limits are. All of those things help to build safety and trust, which were damaged and destroyed in the trauma. I think other ways that we can care are just to recognize that the healing process is complex, it's long, It's slow, it's repetitious, and they really do need people that are with them for the long haul. And that can even include very practical support, like going with them to counselors' appointments, or just being, taking walks with them, being out in nature. Anything that, again, is the opposite of the trauma is a beautiful thing. So being companions, I think, is another really important way of supporting.
Yeah, really, what I'm hearing is you're really just striving to restore the dignity that they have as a human being created in the image of God.
Absolutely.
That's been damaged and broken and abused. And wow, and then the wisdom in setting the healthy boundaries that you, I think, first of all, sacrificially loving them and being willing to do that. But then, as you had mentioned, setting boundaries to say it can be difficult, it can be wearying as someone if you're trying to care for someone, and not trying to push them to heal in your timing, right? But also saying there may be some time that I just need to restore and refresh so that I can better care for them as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes when we think about helping, especially if we know someone has been through a lot, we may feel guilty for saying, no, I can't meet with you tonight, or I can't be on the phone for this long. And no, that's actually not the case. Boundaries are very safe. So boundaries are kind. They're kind to us and they're kind to the person. So being able to say, I really care, but I have this particular limit. Can we talk again another time? Or I can only talk for 20 minutes, or whatever the boundary might be. It doesn't mean that you're being unkind or unhelpful. It's actually quite helpful because they know then what to expect, which again rebuilds that sense of safety and trust.
And security.
Yes.
I appreciate that, because I think that for me personally, that's really hard. The boundaries and feeling guilty as though I'm not always available, but it's really healthy, I've learned as a pastor, for me and for my family and for everyone else.
Absolutely.
And I love how you said that you're affirming your care for them. I care about you. I want to be with you in this. I can't do this at this time, but how about we talk next week or tomorrow? So you're just informing them, you care about them, and you're also giving them space to say, like, yeah, I do want to talk about this at this time.
Yeah, and trauma healing is, like I said, it is a long, slow journey, and it's not a marathon. I mean, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. We all must pace ourselves in it. And I think it's also, I would argue that trauma healing really happens best in community. And so not feeling like you need to be the be-all, end-all for your loved one that you care for that has experienced something, making sure that they have other forms of support apart from you is hugely beneficial.
So that brings us right into a great point of how do we create communities that are doing this well?
I love the way you worded that question, because I think often when churches think about ways they want to get involved and help, they think first and foremost about starting a program or a support group. And while those things can be very beneficial to have people with shared lived experience, it can also kind of feel more isolating and ostracizing. And I think the first place to start is to say, do we have a culture that has created safety and community and kind of a shared living experience that people who have any lived circumstance, they can talk about it in a way that they feel welcomed and they feel supported, they feel believed, they feel cared for. And so I think first and foremost, it's that creating that culture change. I think it also includes in the teaching, in small groups, and in Sunday school classes, and from the pulpit, using terms like abuse and trauma and mental illness, and being able to name those things so that people feel like, wow, this is a place that it's okay for me to not be okay, and I can talk about it, and maybe people will understand. I think also recognizing what you know and what you don't know. There are counselors that can come out and speak and provide training. There's lots of resources. Knowing when to have people come in order to learn more. And finally, know what you don't know and when to refer out. Having local counselors that have expertise in these types of areas so that you can provide the shepherding, but you don't need to provide the professional expertise for the long healing process.
Yeah, and so your counseling services, obviously one reference for that. How do churches, as a pastor and just thinking about where do I find these resources? Do you have any suggestions on how people can do this? They just Google it, or how would people do that?
I think Google it, and then I think it's really great to call up local centers and just ask questions. What kinds of things do you deal with? What might I expect? What kind of approach do you have? And I'd be glad to provide some guidance in what that would look like. Anyone can reach out to me and I can give some more questions of what to ask for. But I think interviewing and building those relationships, if you find one counselor, then you can say, do you know of any other counselors in the area that we might be able to refer to? Also, when you have congregation members who go to counseling, find out what experiences they've had, and you can add those to your list as well.
That's great. And we have a lot of resources in this area, which is fantastic. Yeah. What do you say as we close? What do you say to the person who's watching this, maybe they've experienced trauma and they're afraid to take that next step? How would you encourage them?
Oh, I would just want them to know that they're not alone. They have more courage and worth than they feel and think right now. And to start small. Is there maybe one person that they can share one thing with? And maybe that's the starting point is just resources online. Sometimes it's easier to read the story of a survivor they've never met on some type of a web page or a book and be encouraged by that person. That person could become like a mentor and inspiration if they're not ready to disclose to anyone. But I hope that at some point they will find someone that they trust, that they can share something about their story so that they know that healing is possible and hope can be restored.
Wow. Well, it's a great place to finish. Thank you so much, Heather. This has been so helpful, and I think it's going to encourage a lot of people.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Stay tuned. We're going to come back and talk about how we can apply these principles to our lives.
Watch Lighthouse TV wherever you go. Available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and Apple TV. Search Lighthouse TV online on your streaming device or go to our website lighthousetv.org for more information.
Hebrews 4:15 through 16 comforts us with this powerful truth. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. I love what Dane Ortland says about this passage in his book, Gentle and Lowly. Our tendency is to feel that the more difficult life gets, the more alone we are. As we sink further into pain, we sink further into feeling isolated. The Bible corrects us. Our pain never outstrips what Jesus himself shares in. We are never alone. That sorrow that feels so isolating, so unique, was endured by him in the past and is now shouldered by him in the present. He will never lob down a pep talk from heaven. He cannot bear to hold himself at a distance. Nothing can hold him back from coming to you. His heart is too bound up with yours. Brothers and sisters, tomorrow is a fresh opportunity to saturate the lives and locations around us with the heart of Jesus. It's a blank canvas upon which we can begin painting a picture of the compassionate care of Christ in the places and the spaces in which we live and move. Here are some steps we can take today to begin creating caring community in our lives and churches tomorrow. First, get alone with God right after this program ends and pray that he gives you the heart and compassion of Jesus that compels you to bind your heart to those who are hurting in your life and your church. Second, write down the names of one or two people in your life who are suffering with difficult things and ask yourself these questions. How can I be present with them? How can I find ways to walk alongside them, give them space to have feelings, and meet them where they are? How can I be understanding and patient with them as they process through their suffering? How can I listen well and wisely to them? And how can I be aware of my personal weariness and the ways I'm tempted to get frustrated that they aren't moving beyond their suffering in the ways and timing that I would like? Third, pick one answer to those questions and go and put it into practice with that person this week. Thank you so much for joining us for One Day Closer, where we're learning together how to use our one day closer to eternity to bring Jesus-infused hope and purpose to many.